All right, I'm also streaming on a YouTube live stream, so you can go here as well if it helps you out. There you go. If that's better quality by any chance, there is a YouTube live stream where I'm streaming all of this, so you can go directly there. Let me share screen again. All right. Cool. We're done with. Let me do a quick recap of what we have done until now. Step 1, we looked at the repository a bit. We're creating Paytm from scratch. Step 2, we introduced the MongoDB schemas for it, which basically means this file right here in Visual Studio Code that would let us put data in the database. Step 3, we created a routing structure. You can create it in various ways. The one that I have created it is app.use/API/v1 to the main router /user to the user router is where all my requests will get handled. Here I will get a router.get/ and add all of my endpoints. And lastly, all of this code that will let us bootstrap our application. A few external dependencies that I asked you to include. First is CORS. Let me add that. npm i-CORS. Go back to index.js. Require CORS and then app.use. CORS body parser that lets you parse the JSON objects. We did this in the past. App.use express.json. JSON web token, the library that we will use to eventually create and hash tokens. Exporting a JWT secret from backend/config.js. Creating a new file in the root folder, call it config.js, where we export a JWT token. Export equal to and lastly, listening to port 3000 in the root folder. So app.listen 3000. This is all the code that was supposed to be written until slide 5. I'm going to push it in case you've not been able to follow along. Although all the solutions are present in the slides, so you can copy paste at this point if you've not been able to reach. All right. If the screen share here is blur, I've pasted a link to a YouTube live. You can go there directly. Let's proceed to the next step, which is adding the real backend routes. This is where I would definitely urge you to code a little bit yourself. So go to user.js and start to add the routes that are expected here, specifically the one for signing up and signing in. Let me look at Q&A until then. Bro, how's the video blurry on Zoom? This is extremely irritating. Try to look at the chat. I've pasted a YouTube video link where I'm
the routes that are expected.
Yeah, this looks pretty good. So you can just go to the YouTube video link for now. It's an unlisted stream. I see a few people watching here. Much better. All right. Send repo link here. Let's see. Yeah, we should just stream on YouTube from now. Cool. Yeah, I think YouTube is much better, guys. If you want to go there, just feel free to go to YouTube and look at the stream over there. Latency is high there, but that's fine. I think quality matters more at this point. All right. Feel free to go to Zoom, guys. See a few people here already. Okay. People are saying Zoom is extremely laggy now because I'm streaming to two places. I am not surprised. So feel free to go there and look at the screen share on YouTube. It's apparently much better, is what people are saying. Can't see chat on Zoom for some reason. All right. We're at step 6 now. If you're just joining in, if you have not been able to catch up until this point, all the code has been pushed to the solution during class branch. You can just clone this code locally on your machine and start updating user.js, which needs to introduce the sign up and sign in routes. All the details for which are present here. YouTube streaming is much better, dude. It's like so much easier for me to read through chat also. I can add, I can read names much better. Yeah, there needs to be someone who's solving for this. But chalo, anyways. Let me start coding at 7:47. Hopefully you guys have already started to code. All the instructions are here. You have to use Zod for validation. And you have to check if the database doesn't already have a user with this given email. All right. Going to paste the YouTube video link for everyone who have just joined. Try to go to YouTube. It's so much better. This thing. All right. People love YouTube. Great. Let's stream on YouTube from now on. Let me tell you, that is not legal. If you're charging people, and you can't use YouTube streaming for a gated YouTube stream, basically. People used to do it in EdTech and then they got cases from YouTube. So you shouldn't do what we're doing right now. All right. Hopefully some of you were able to at least create the sign up route. I'm going to code it myself as well. Again, people who are just joining, just go to YouTube where we're streaming as well, which is apparently 1000x better experience than this. I think the screen is blurring out really bad here. Router.post/signup. And if possible, don't share the stream with everyone. Const body equal to rec.body. Require Zod. All right, I wrote a bunch of code that was actually already present here in the solution, which was what? Okay, you have to create the Zod schema for the incoming body, and then on the /signup endpoint, first make sure that the schema is valid, and then check if an existing user exists. If they do exist, then stop the sign up request right there. Or if the validation isn't correct, the user has sent you some erroneous data, then also stop it right here. Else create a new user, get the ID, create the token, return the response. The standard flow we have done many times now. The only extra things is we are making sure no user can sign up twice with the same email. We are making sure an extra validation layer, they are not sending us any erroneous data. We are ensuring the username they have sent us is a valid email, because this is a basic validation you should do, right? Ideally, what you should do, you should send out an OTP here to the user, a verification email, which the user will click on and then they will actually sign up. We're not doing that yet, which is why we are assuming the user, whatever email they have sent is correct. Shall we proceed? Few people are still here in the polls. A lot of people have left as well. %. For the people who did understand, finish the sign-in route as well, very similar to the sign-up route, and then go on to the next slide, which is on creating the middleware, which is also something we have done many times now. Looking at Q&A now. Repo is not updated. Terminal. You are probably looking at the wrong branch. If you look at the right branch, which is solution during class, here you will find all the code. You can copy it over from backend / whatever, user.js, index.js, or if you know how to work with branches by now, which you should, you can just do it. All right. You will get an offline video for this one. So is it? Yeah, you can watch the video offline. Don't even worry about it. Any more questions? Where is the 25% stuck? Is it just taking some time to do it? There will be an offline video for this, yes. How can you add OTP thingy? Yeah, so look at SendGrid APIs. Basically find a provider that lets you send email. Sending email is the most difficult bit there. Creating an OTP is slightly easier. There are a few standard ways to do it. You can put it in the database. There is a verification link with this OTP sent to a user. You can do it without databases as well. If you've seen this auth application in phones, the way they do it, I'm not sure how many of you have seen these authenticator applications, which basically let you do. Oh, shoot. My camera isn't visible, is it? On Zoom at least. So let me, never mind. All right. Yeah, there are ways to do it. Let's not go there just yet though. All right. Middleware. Here I'm just going to copy the solution. But what is this middleware? It needs to make sure if you have any authenticated requests, they need to flow through the middleware. Let me also put myself on screen here for YouTube. So people on Zoom will probably see me twice here, which I'm going to apologize for. But hello everyone from YouTube. View. All right, there we go. Hopefully you guys can see me now. What I was showing was, if you've seen this authenticator application, the way these do stateless OTPs is another way you can do OTPs if you don't want to put more load on your database. All right. Please don't show YouTube on Zoom. Please don't show. Oh, okay, my bad. I won't do that. Cool. Let's copy over middleware.js which is the middleware which will actually verify all the authenticated requests that users send. This is something we've done a few times now, so I'm assuming it's not too difficult. What do we do here? We basically say, okay, bhai, anytime a request comes, get the auth header and make sure it starts with bearer. What did the assignment say? Checks the header that the token is present in this format. Harkirat, what is bearer? Basically tells you the type of the token this is. You can have various types of tokens that can be used for authenticating requests. API key is another popular one. The user can send you an API key that they've generated from their dashboard. So in that case, this would be API key. In standard authenticated requests like these, you'll see bearer as the first word, space the actual token that the user needs to send. So this token right here is what we fetch here by splitting it by space and getting the second element. Decode it and verify it if a user ID does exist. Probably have an if check here, if decoded.user ID. Only then route it to the next person, else return a 403. Cool. Hopefully this is straightforward. Done it a few times. I think I went a little too quick on this one though, so I'm unsure if you were able to code along. But let me do a quick poll here. (50-50). Going to take a pause. Do you want me to code it myself, or is there something else? I'll upload this video on 1-200 as well, for the people who are asking. Multiple face video on Zoom. Difference between body password JSON and express JSON, pretty much the same thing. They will both parse JSON. It's just similar code written in two different libraries. Why brackets in success? Because this returns you an object. You can totally do this, or you can do the other syntax. This is called. Do you guys see multiple of me? I apologize. Let me turn off my video on Zoom. That should do it. There you go. Is it better for Zoom people? Does order matter when you're using CORS? Yes, it does matter. If you put both of these after, then you're screwed. None of these will run. First this route will run and then these will run, which is why always make sure your app.uses, specifically the middlewares that you need, are above your actual route. So the order does matter here. How to restrict user to visit login page if they are not logged in. How to restrict pages. Let's do that once we reach the front end bit. How to restrict users. Okay, same question multiple times. Need some time to understand this whole thing. All right. The good thing is the assignment is here with you. So take your time and, code it yourself. Let me do another poll here. (75-20). So people who, feel free to keep moving on, guys. Yeah, if you've created the middleware, there are 2 more routes that you need to create. So please create those until then. I'll look at chat. All right, let me look at chat. People are asking me to push in the code, so let me do that. Checkpoint 3. Again, it's in a different branch. So please get the code from the solution during class branch. You can use bcrypt for hashing passwords. For the people who did not notice this, in this slide right here, there was a note that said we are not hashing passwords before putting them in the database. What that means is if I go to my MongoDB database and eventually go to the users table, I will actually be able to see my end users passwords, which is something you don't want. You want to hash passwords before you put them in. There is a detailed blog here that takes you to how to do it. Bcrypt is a standard library that lets you do hashing, which is what you need in this case. And there's also a concept of something called a salt, which is another standard popular interview question. Okay, bhai, yeah, this is probably sort of important. I haven't discussed it, so let me quickly discuss this. If this is your database and this is your Express server, and your end user sends you his password, which is, let's say, 123456, then you don't want to store 123456 in the database. You want to first hash this. And what does hashing mean? It means it's one way. It is converted from this into some very random gibberish. And then this gibberish is what gets stored in the database. Why is this good? Because no Facebook employee can now see that Harkirat's password is 123456, or I love Priya. If you love Priya, if that's your password. Another big reason this needs to be done is, there's also like laws around this. You should not store passwords in plain text in the database. Another big reason is that people repeat passwords. So if this is my password and I repeat it on Google, then a Facebook employee who can snoop in the database can actually log into my Google account. And another thing that I was introducing was this concept of a salt, which basically means, if Harkirat's password is 123456 and even Bill Gates' password is 123456, and then Harkirat is an employee at Facebook, Harkirat can see that my and Bill Gates, both of our hashes are the same. And if my password is 123456, then of course Bill Gates' password is also 123456. So before you actually hash someone's password, you should add a unique salt, which basically means, some namak, some salt on top of this original password, which could be a random string. For Harkirat, let's say it's, Harkirat1. For Bill Gates, let's say it's Bill1. And then a combination of this should get hashed before storing in the database. Same thing here. That way, even though our passwords are the same, since this final string is different, our final hashes are different. So no one can guess that the passwords here are same. These are the two important things to do before you put the data in the database. Usually the salt is also stored in the database along with the main password. So like the hashed password and the salt is what you put in the database. And yeah, this is why you do it. Hopefully that was clear. This blog post will take you through all of this if you want to do it. Always do this, even though a lot of people don't do it, especially in India. India, my people just store passwords in plain text. And why is that bad? Because you can just, copy over people's password. All right. We were at the user routes. Let me do a quick poll. All right, that sounds pretty good, 81%. So let's do the user routes, which now will use the middleware that we created on step 8. What did we do here? We created a middleware. Why did we do this? Because the next set of routes need to use this middleware. The reason for this is these routes will let the user update their information, for example, their password, their first name, their last name, and a route for user to get other users from the backend. This is a Paytm-like application where you want to allow users to get their friends from a database so that they can basically show them here. If I go back to the first slide, you might have seen, okay, this is what our final application looks like. So there needs to be a call that I need to make that will return me कि हाँ user 1, user 2, user 3 are part of the database, and I can actually search Harkirat here. So I can see Harkirat here and I can send them money. So we need to expose an endpoint that gives you the list of users that currently exists in the database. The only big caveat here is when you are implementing this, you need to make sure you don't send the password of other people back to the front end. That is the only sort of high level thing to keep in mind. All right, let's look at the solution for updating the user's information. It's this thing right here. Get the auth middleware. This is what you expect as the body. The user can send a new password or a new first name or a new last name, and you need to put them in the database. Router.put, anytime there's a put request, because put is usually what's used for updating databases. Do the Zod validation, make sure the user has sent, some key here, and then update the user, and then send them, update it successfully. This was the simple route to implement for updating a user's information. Where will this be used? In a profile page where a person can come and change their password. The second one is slightly tricky because you will learn something new here. A lot of times when you are querying your database, you have to ask queries like this. Okay, bhai, give me all users whose name is like HAR. Basically means either starts with HAR, ends with HAR, or has HAR in the middle. That is how people will on the front end search, right? They will put HAR in the search bar, and the backend needs to return all the users who either have HAR in their first name or their last name. How do you do a query like this? We have done exact queries until now. Okay, user.find one, where user whatever name is Harkirat. This type of query we have done. But what is the query that we have to do now? Okay, where name looks like HAR, has HAR as a substring. This is very common in SQL databases. There is like this. If you have done SQL a little bit, the query there looks like this: select star from users where name like percentage HAR percentage. This is like a very common primitive in SQL databases that let you do search based on the current, like the name looking something like this. Where is this not common? In MongoDB or Mongoose, which is why what does this endpoint need to do? It needs to return users so you can search for them and send them some money. It is a get endpoint which has a query parameter filter equal to the thing that the user put in the input box. Given this input, I need to return them a list of users who have this specific string in either their first name or last name. There is a hints section here that will basically talk you through, number one, how can you do OR queries in Mongoose, and number two, how can you do this like thing that I was talking about. Okay, make sure even if a substring matches, that row should be returned from the database. Ideally read through these and they will take you through how to do this. The solution, if you look at it, does a users.find. Now it's not as simple as first name equal to something. It is an OR, which again, if you go through this, you will find the standard way of doing this. I wrote this syntax by looking at this Stack Overflow question. Okay, how can I do two queries at the same time? OR, which is an array, either to this is true or this is true. If either one of this is true, then that user should be returned. And what is the query? It's not as simple as first name is filter. It is first name regex filter. This syntax is what you can use to match a substring in the final row and not the whole string. If there is a first name which has, HAR in it somewhere, that will be returned. Or if there is a last name which has HAR in it, that will be returned. How did I reach here? Here and here. It is actually I would have expected a more standard way to do this in Mongoose, but there isn't. This is the syntax to do like queries. By like I mean how you do like queries in SQL. This is how you do it in Mongoose. And the OR is for, since we can either match on the first name or on the last name, because the end user can search either one of these in the input box. That's what the OR query is for. All right. Cool. How are we doing? Again, the goal was for you to code this yourself. I don't think I've given enough time though. Let me look at YouTube as well. Oh, camera. Sorry about that. Hopefully you can see it. %. Cool. To maintain structure, let me proceed, but at the same time, let me look at Q&A now. Where are we passing the query parameter in this filter? Great question. If you look at the solution, const filter equal to rec.query.filter. This is how you get the query parameter, and this is where I'm sending it to the database. How are we doing the Zod validation for the password hash? Zod validation is for end user inputs. End user will never give you a hash. End user will give you a plain text password. That is what you validate on, and then you put the hash in the database without any validation. Is the sample Paytm project we are going to do at the end of 0 to 1 cohort? Not exactly. That will not be in Mongoose. That will be in Postgres plus Prisma plus a bunch of other things. Can we do text indexing for this schema for easier search? Can you do indexing in Mongoose? You can do indexing, yes. I think there's a way to put an index on a field in MongoDB. YouTube link is right here. Let me paste it in chat. If so, then convert it to. Why are we using Mongo? Because since you can do SQL easily, because that's what's been taught until now. Is doing index searching good idea? In this case, we're searching user. Yeah, putting an index when you're doing search is never a bad idea. Indexing it's just a way to do better search when you have to query on a certain field, in which this case is first name or last name. You should put index on them. What is an index? How do you create it? What does it do under the hood? We will cover in 1 to 100. Can you do a detailed recap of everything we've done until now? Yes, let me do that. We have gone through step 1 to 8 of the assignment until now. Step 1 was just cloning the repository locally, and this is what we are creating by the end of it. Step 2 was adding a bunch of schemas, specifically the user schema, and this is what it looks like. This is a more elegant solution for the same thing. Step 3 was creating a routing structure to route incoming requests to a specific handler. There are multiple ways of doing it. The one that we chose was, there'll be a top level handler that will handle all the requests coming to /API/v1. And then we said inside that top level handler, all requests coming to /user will go to this user router. And then we said, let's introduce a few external dependencies, specifically CORS, because our front end and back end are going to be on different URLs. Body parser to parse the incoming JSON body. JSON web token, just add as a dependency. Create a JWT secret that will be stored on the backend to actually sign the user ID and create the token. And then finally, listen on a specific port on the application. Step 6, add the backend auth routes. So here onwards, things got a little tricky, where we started to add 4 routes. Route number 1, sign up. Route number 2, sign in. Route number 3, give me all the list of users that exist in the database. Step number 4, let me update my first name, last name, and my password in the database. These are the 4 routes that we need to add. Along with these 4 routes, we also add a middleware, which lets the user checks whether the user has sent the right token or not. And if they have, decode it and let the request flow, else stop the request and return back a 403. That is all we've done until step 8. Let me do all of this locally and push the code in. If people want to just, follow along from there. I think there is a final solution file. No, never mind. The final solution, by the way, is already present in a different branch, like the end solution. You can actually go to Paytm /solution backend solution, and this will give you basically all the routes in the backend, the final state in which the backend should be. And here, if I go to user.js, this contains the sign up route, the sign in route, the update metadata route, and then a route to get all the users that exist in the database currently. Let me copy this over. I mean, yeah, you can just go here and look at the final solution. Let me just not keep pushing code here. If you want to skip to the final solution / keep checkpointing, backend solution branch has the final code that actually runs everything. All right. We haven't yet reached the final code here in slides, but this has all the final code if you want to look at it. All right, let's proceed. Create bank related schema. Until now, we only have a single database, the users database. We haven't introduced a place where we are storing the users' balances. How much money does a user have? That is another database that we need to have in MongoDB. So let's create the schema for it. What does it say? It's as simple as this. Okay, a user ID, which is a string, and a balance, which is a number, the amount of rupees the person has. There is a good warning here to keep in mind. Okay, you don't store floats in databases usually, specifically in cases like these. If you're creating a payments application, you will not store 1988.88 rupees in the database. You will store 8888, some integer, and you will know the number of decimal places for our application is 2. So 8888 in the database actually means 88.88. There are precision issues both in JavaScript and in databases that can lead to, this becoming 887777, which is something you don't want. You don't want, balances to ever be different even by 0.001, which is why usually in a payment application, the thing that you store in the database, if someone has 88.88 rupees, you will store this in the database. And of course, on the front end, you will show them 88.88, but in the database, you will store the complete integer. In our case, does not matter. Feel free to assume either, but this is a good warning to keep in mind. And the other thing that I've said is good to do here is create references, which basically means if you know, okay, this user ID in this table will always depend on some user here, you can create references which are similar to foreign keys in SQL if you've done them. Basically, will make sure okay, the code, you can never put something in the balances table that doesn't already exist in the users table. You cannot create a balance for someone who's not already a user. To enforce that, you can create references ki bhaiya, this depends on the other table. And that way, if you try to put some erroneous thing in the database for, let's say, a user that doesn't exist, the database doesn't let you, or Mongoose in this case basically prevents you. All right. This is what the schema looks like. The user schema we saw already. The accounts schema, as you can see, pretty simple, straightforward. Balance, which is a number, and user ID, which is of type not string but mongoose.schema.types.object_id. This basically represents the, if you look at the MongoDB database ever, we've seen that the IDs are, of type, this thing called object ID. Let me see if I can find something. If I add some data here, this thing, as you can see, it says OID. It basically is like a way or like a type in MongoDB. This specific ID follows certain formats, is of a certain length, so on and so forth. So this, if you want to reference the users table, which basically does what happens if I add this? It ensures I cannot put anything in this accounts table that does not have a corresponding user here. Only if a user with a certain ID exists, will I be able to put something in the accounts schema, which will store what? The balance of this user. Of course, this will be 0 immediately. Like initially, we'll see how we can seed data here because we don't have actual banking APIs. So people can't come to our application and, actually put money here. So we'll seed some data inside. We'll see how. But this is the expected schema for accounts. Is that clear? Let me do a quick poll here. Again, the final solution is already here. So if you go to backend/db.js, you will see the users schema as well as the accounts schema. Okay, this is all the balances of the users. All right. So if this is clear, would urge you to go to the next slide, which is the important thing to learn today. If I'm being honest, if there's one thing that you need to learn, it is this. Let me get to what that is in 2 minutes. Take a pause, take a breather. Let me look at Q&A until then. Let's take a small break. Let's meet back at 8:25. Trim true in schema. Trim true basically means if there is some extra space or in the beginning or in the end of the screen, in the string, trim it down. I'm assuming that's what it means. 99% that's what it means. So before things reach the database, if there is some extra space in the beginning of the string, if someone wrote their name as, space, Harkirat, space, then trim it out from the beginning and the end. That's what trim means. And references, you don't have to do references. It's just it makes your database more strict by doing, so worst case, don't do this and make this a string. That works as well. When you do this, what happens is, even if there is a bug in your code that, let's say, tries to put something in the accounts table, the user ID of which is null, let's say, or it is 123, which is a user that does not exist, the database won't let you, or Mongoose won't let you. Mongoose will prevent you from putting data in right there because a user with that ID does not exist. That is why having a reference here helps. It also helps in other cases where you can, if you want to ever search a user given an account, that's easier. But the bigger reason I added it here was because you want your database to be very strict, which this guy will let it be a little more strict. Even if you have some bug in your backend code that lets you put some account schema for a user that doesn't exist, it will prevent you. Can we get all the backend from all users since there is no search? You can get all the users from the backend. If there is no search, if you don't pass anything in the filter right here, it will be like, acha, give me a user who has an empty space in their name, which every user does. So basically it'll return you everything. So yeah, that's why I added a or empty string here. If the user does not pass us any filter, make it an empty string. And what does that do? It searches the database, which will basically give you everything. How do I get access to the slides? They're present here. Pasting it in chat one more time. What a user has 8888 rupees, then you will store 888800. That is correct. Whatever is the decimal number that your application supports, you can basically, publicize this. Ke bhai, we only support up to 2 decimal places, which in India basically mean ke, up to paise, which is like what comes after rupees. This is the max that we support. Don't ever try to send your friend 88.888 rupees. We won't be able to support it. We will only send them this much. So whatever you publicize, if that's 2 decimal places, then for 88.88 you will store 8888 in your database. For 88 rupees, you will store 8800 in your database. Why are we sending JWT token in the sign up route? We are not sending JWT token in the sign up route. What makes you think like we're sending JWT token in the sign up route? Sign up, success. The body looks something like this. This does not have the JWT token. Step 8 and 9 one more time. Let's do that. Step 8 is the user route. I'm assuming this route is pretty simple. The one that lets the user update their password, use first name and last name. The other route lets the user get data from get all the other users from the backend. Let's say I did not have the constraint that the user can search. Let's say I said that bhai, our UI is very simple. If you go back to the original UI, I say that nahi, the UI of our application will have a list of users. User is not allowed to search. This search bar does not exist. If I put that constraint in, that this search bar is not needed, then you can create a simple endpoint that just returns you all the users, right? Then this is a pretty simple problem to solve. Do a user.find, no constraints, and give back all the users. Just make sure you are not returning the password to the front end. This is why I have done a users.map. Only return username, first name, last name, and ID. Don't return the password of the user to the other user. That's a problem. So don't return users as such here. Map it to whatever fields the front end needs. The difficult bit is this filter. The difficult bit is allowing the user to filter based on some substring. These are the 2 links that I also reached by Googling 2 things. How can you implement a like query in MongoDB, and how can you do multiple queries at the same time in MongoDB. And what did they tell me? If I want to search either on first name or on last name, I can use the .or primitive here, okay, users.find or any of these conditions. If any of these conditions is met, that row is considered true. And rather than doing a first name equal to filter, I am doing first name regex filter. What is regex? It's a whole concept in itself. If you look at it here, you'll find a few other implementations of, doing a substring search. This is the easiest or the cleanest to look at, which is why I chose this, but you can actually create regular expressions in JavaScript and do this search. If you look at it here, you'll find a few other ways, but this is the syntax to do like searches in the database. And this is to do multiple searches at the same time. And if I go to slide 9, this is just creating a schema. The difficult bit here probably is this reference bit. Feel free to ignore it. You don't need this or even this. This can be a simple string. The reason I've added this is so that you'll see this later on as well. Like we'll add a few very strict constraints to our backend. We will make sure that our backend is, to the database. Even if the backend has some bug, the bad backend should also not be allowed to hit the database with their NS data. These constraints sort of enforce that. This constraint pretty much enforces if ever in my backend code there's some bug and I try to do a user dot create user ID random ID balance very big number, Mongoose won't let me. Mongoose will be like, "Arey, this user doesn't exist only. There is no user with this ID in the database, and hence this query will fail if my backend ever has a bug and it tries to hit the database like this. If it does not, great. That is why I added the reference here. All right, cool. Now comes the most interesting bit of today's class. If you've stuck around till here, you'll learn something new today. I've written some code and there is some bug in this code. Specifically for banks, there is one very important thing you have to do, which is, if there is a user 1, let's say has 1,000 rupees, 10,000 rupees, user 2, which has 20 rupees, your net balance, basically, if you have 1,000 rupees in your Paytm wallet and someone else has 20 rupees in their Paytm wallet, the real Paytm SBI bank needs to hold this much rupees, right? In the end, what is a number that you see in your Paytm wallet? It is something that you gave to Paytm at some point. You went to your net banking and topped up your Paytm wallet. So they need to have this money in their actual real bank. These are just numbers in a database. When you go to the Paytm app and look at your wallet balance, not your bank balance, your wallet balance, these are just numbers in the database. Paytm needs to make sure that the sum of all their user balances they have in their bank, maybe a little bit more, but at least this much they need to have in their bank, else they're, illiquid. So whenever a transaction is happening, what is a transaction? Now transactions have two meanings here. Databases transaction means something else. The transaction that I'm talking about is you sending money to someone. What will happen? You will send a request to to the Paytm server. Okay, please send 100 rupees to Harkirat or whatever, user 2. And what does this backend need to do? It needs to make your balance rupees 900, make the other person's balance rupees 120. That's the transition it needs to make. What does it not need to do? When will this become problematic? This will become problematic if you send this request and the Paytm server partially fills this request. What do I mean when I say partially fills it? Means it puts 120 here, but forgets to debit yours. Then the net balance here is 1120 and the Paytm bank does not have this much money. You've basically not deducted 100 rupees when you should have. This is something that should never happen in even an exchange, even a Paytm like app, a bank, whatever. This is something you need to be very careful of. So this transaction, whenever it happens, needs to be very safe. Specifically, you need to make sure either everything happens or nothing happens. If the database goes down in the middle, something random happens in the middle, you need to revert the whole thing. You need to make sure that, bhai, if I ended up making this 120 and then the debit request fails, if this became 120 but the debit request here failed, make this 20 again. Roll back the transaction or the database, all the database calls, either complete them together or roll them back. Don't be in a hung state in the middle. All right. Hopefully that's straightforward and why that needs to be done. Question is, let's say I introduce a function called transfer funds that has two inputs, from which account ID you need to send money, to account ID where you need to send money, and the amount that you need to send. And let's say this is the code that I write to do it. Again, this is something new here. What does .inc balance minus amount means? It means increase the balance of the first user by minus amount, which basically means, decrease it by this much number. And this one is increase it by the other number. Okay? What does this line do? It will find this user and decrease their balance by this amount. And this line will increase their balance by the same amount. What is the problem in this approach? If I try to call the transfer funds function, what could go wrong? And let me open Q&A here and see if people already have thoughts. Hopefully it's pretty simple. Commit and rollback sounds like error handling. One transaction might fail. Race problem is also something. Insufficient balance is also something, right? Which is something this guy does not check. Yeah, balance is already 0 is a good thing. Any one call fails in between is a good thing. Only one thing, negative value. Perfect. So the first thing is I have not done any check here to make sure this user actually has this much rupees. That's the first problem. We can do that very easily. Just put another if check above, even though that's also problematic. But yeah, that's will be simpler. The bigger problem is, what if I call this, and this is an asynchronous call. It takes 3 seconds to do. Control comes back here and my node server dies for whatever reason. The server crashes, I restart my machine, or this request goes, the database accepts it, comes back here, and then the database goes down for a minute. Databases can always go down. They can come back up and the data is still persisted there. Basically, if this partially commits or half of the request happens, this thing happens and this doesn't happen, or vice versa, your database is in an inconsistent state, which is something you never want. You want both of these to happen together or none of them to happen, for which you can do transactions in databases. It's a very common concept across SQL, NoSQL databases. If you've done DBMS, you've probably heard of it. In an application like this, it becomes super important. You have to somehow wrap this inside a transaction and make sure either both of them happen or neither happen. You have to do a bunch of other checks. If you add a simple if check above, if the balance is 0, then or if the balance is less than this amount, then stop right here. That also can be problematic if two requests come at the same time. If this, you might, I don't know if you've tried this, but I've tried this. If you've gone to, a newly created wallet, have you tried, being like 20 rupees to Harkirat and immediately 20 rupees to Raman? Okay, bhai, what if, I'm able to sneak in, I only have 20 rupees in my bank or whatever, my Google Pay. And I'm trying my best to, send 2 transactions immediately. Unko pata hi na chale. They somehow miss out and they end up sending 20 rupees both to Harkirat and Raman because they're, the requests come so quickly. What am I trying to do in that case? I'm trying to fool the if check here. If there was an if check above that checked if Harkirat has less than 20 rupees, then don't do any of these. If that if check was above, if I send 2 requests together, that if check might succeed for both of them, and then I'll make the balance 0 in once and then minus 20 in another one. That's another case you need to worry about. Number 1, you have to worry about कि भाई the request does not partially succeed. Number 2 thing you need to worry about is if there is an if check above, it sort of needs to run first for the first transaction and then for the second transaction. Hopefully that's clear. If not, let's look at the code and try to understand what's happening. I also have a final use case where I've tried to send 2 concurrent requests and we'll see how that fails. All right. Cool. Let's look at the answer here. The answer was that there was the solution here, I guess. So maybe you saw already. Cool. One thing you have to do before we proceed is initialize balances on sign up. Whenever the user signs up, give them a random balance between 1 and 10,000 rupees. Just so we don't have to worry about banking APIs and people actually putting money there. Just give them a random balance on sign up. So what have I done? When the user signs up, along with all the things I was doing, I have done an account.create user ID with some random balance between 1 to 100,000 or 10,000, whatever. I am skipping through. I'm going a little fast now. Don't expect you guys to code along because we're at close to time here, and your brain will probably stop working after a point. So let me take you through all of these, and then you should code them yourself later on. Create an account with a random balance on sign up so that the user has some account balance to play with initially. And then finally, create a new router for accounts, just how we did a app.use/user router. Do a router.use/account router so that all requests that are coming to /API/v1/account go to the second router. Again, just for ease of reading code, if you look at it here, I have all the account route handlers here in account.js, router.get, router.post, and all the user handlers here. In index.js, I'm just saying that bhai, if the request comes here, go here. If the request comes here, go here. All right. Don't expect you to code this so quickly, by the way. All right. Cool. The main endpoint. Let's get to the most interesting bit for today's class, which is how to implement this transaction thing in MongoDB that I was talking about. The first endpoint you have to implement is an endpoint for the user to get their balance, which is as simple as this. Router.get/balances, put the auth middleware here, do a account.find1, some account which has this user ID, and then return account.balance. This one hopefully is straightforward. Again, after the class, you should code it yourself. And then the second bit, which is an endpoint for user to transfer money to another account. This one is the tricky bit where you'll see a lot of code and, new code you haven't seen, which is how you create a transaction in MongoDB. There we go. This is the input that's expected. Okay, I want to send to this person XYZ money. This is the amount I want to send to the other person. This is the ID of the other person I want to send the money to. These are the status codes. Now there is a bad solution, a good solution, and the problems you might run into if you are trying to do this yourself completely. Let's start with the bad solution, which basically does not take care of any transactions. It'll work unless you do concurrent transactions, or unless your database goes down in the middle in which you have a partially executed transaction. You get the amount and to whom you want to send the money. You get the account of this user and make sure they have at least that much money. If they don't, then you return them a message that says insufficient balance. If they do have that much money, you get the to account. Who are they trying to send the money, and does that actually exist? Is that user actually in the database? If not, then return 400 again. If that is the case, user.update one, increase the balance by minus amount, increase the balance by plus amount, and you're good to go. This is a great solution in an ideal scenario where the database you feel like will always be up, and all of these lines of code will run from top to bottom. Your Node.js process will also always be up, which is a bad assumption to make because both Node.js processes and databases go down from time to time. What is the good solution? How do you do transactions in MongoDB? You first have to create what's called a session. Okay, bhai, now I'm going to do a bunch of things together. Please let me do them. And if anyone fails, revert. You create a session. You say, I'm starting a transaction. Everything that happens after this needs to either happen together or needs to roll back. It will never partially execute. Anything that comes between session.start transaction to session.commit transaction, either all of this happens together or none of this happens. This is how databases are. So this is nothing related to Mongo is doing something special, or Node.js is doing something special. In a database, if you start a transaction, unless you commit it, it will not partially execute. And if you commit it, everything will execute. It will not partially execute. Okay, so what is the two things I have to do? Start a session, start a transaction, and then do the same logic I've done until now. Nothing special inside. It still gets my balance, make sure the user exists. And if they don't exist, then abort the transaction so that it does not remain hung there forever. And then lastly, update my balance, update the other user's balance, and commit the transaction. If you do this, then your solution is pretty elegant. It handles both of the cases that I've talked about, which is number one, make sure everything happens together. Number two, if someone sends two concurrent requests also, right? If someone calls these functions almost immediately, tab bhi they cannot fool us with this if check. Again, why do people send concurrent requests? Why do they want to fire up requests of 1,000 rupees to Harkiyat, 1,000 rupees to Raman? They want to do it to fool this check. Okay, bhai, for the first request, control will reach here. And then, after it checks ki balance, I have 20 rupees, it will go here and remain hung. It will be like, it has not yet updated my balance to 0. And then the other request also comes, and that also goes beyond this if check. If both the requests are able to go beyond this if check, then we're sorted, right? Then we've fooled the system and we've made our balance negative basically, which is something you don't want the end user to be able to do. When you're creating a transaction, it also ensures in MongoDB that during that transaction, whatever you have read, I repeat, whatever you have read does not get updated during the transaction. If I read something, for example, I read the details for this account and that got updated while this transaction was running, someone else updated it, then the original transaction will fail. A better way to put this is, if I try to do this, if you look at the very end, an experiment to ensure that transactions are working as expected. If I create a function, forget all HTTP routes for now. If I create a function which simulates a transfer, this function does everything that I've talked about until now, creates the session, creates the transaction, commits the transaction. And if I call it twice, right one after the other, which basically means it will fool this check. While it is stuck here somewhere on this await, the other request will go in, and then that will also proceed beyond this check. If I try to do both of these together, I will get this error that says write conflict error. The operation conflicted with another operation. If you try to read on something that has been written on in another transaction, the transaction will fail, which will make sure you don't get stuck in the second problem of negative balances. And since we're doing a transaction, we've already gotten rid of the first problem, which is this doesn't execute partially. ऐसा नहीं होगा कि this line will run and this line will not run. Either both of them will run or neither one of these will run. Cool. That was the difficult bit of today. How are we doing? At least understanding the code, and then we can actually write the code as well. All of these, if you're doing this after the class yourself, try to code it by looking at these Stack Overflows rather than just copying over the solution. That's the only advice I'd have. All right. Let me look at YouTube as well. How's YouTube doing? All right, people are pretty much chilling there. Cool. What's up next? Checkpoint or something. That's pretty much it. If you do all of this, you should be able to implement all the endpoints, and then you should go to Postman and try to get your balance. As you see, I have a balance of 2099. If you make a transfer, you should see transfer successful, and you should see my balance go down to 1999. If everything you've done is right, then you can pretty much checkpoint based on these screenshots, and your MongoDB database should look like this. A users table, which has all the users, an accounts table, which has all the accounts, which has like these balances, 1999513, so on and so forth. 43. Let's take a pause here, and let me look at YouTube chat and Zoom chat together. Iske baad, it's the front end bit. This is basically how you create the front end, which let me create an offline video for. The front end will finally look something like this. There will be a sign up page that you have to create using Tailwind, sign in page that you have to create, and this balances page, and a send money endpoint. Again, writing this is the difficult bit. I think connecting it to backend is fairly simple. Could be wrong, but I think the most time consuming bit in the front end might be how you create these pretty UIs and not how you can, connect it to the backend. You just have to send a bunch of Axios calls. Cool. Going to look at Q&A and chat now. How are we doing? How to handle this transaction error? Oh, just tell the end. Okay, great question, I guess. So what you can do is put this inside, put all of this inside a try catch block. And if it ever reaches the catch block, then just abort the transaction and then return to the user, okay, bro, something went wrong, something like this. This is damn heavy. I think there was only one heavy bit here, other than, I don't know. Okay, looking at Q&A as well now. How to send 2 immediate payment requests on phone? What does dot session do? Immediate requests on phone, ke bhai, pick one phone, pick another phone, and then send requests. You will never be able to simulate that. The best way to simulate, concurrent requests is what I've done here, like 2 concurrent function calls. That's the only way you can, actually simulate the transfer happening immediately. If you try to do it from front-end UIs, most probably you won't be able to hit the, the edge case we're trying to test. Did you make this website? It's Notion and then, iframed on top. It's all Notion basically, yeah. Very interesting how we're using session thingy to keep working. The real world scenario, UPI still fails. Is this different from UPI? I'm pretty sure UPI under the hood. UPI is hitting your bank. It's a whole different ball game. UPI in the end, UPI is just a layer on top of banks, right? In the end, it's a banking API. So the bank probably does do this. Probably 100% does this. If you go to HDFC Bank and try to make a transfer twice when you have only 100 rupees and try to transfer 100 rupees to 2 people at the same time, of course it won't let you. Explain session, a lot of people are asking. If you want the more technical definition of session, I'm pretty sure I added a hint here. I didn't. Ruk jao. There's a very nice session, MongoDB. Let me add this as well. Client sessions. This is what we are creating. To provide casual consistency, MongoDB enabled casual consistency in client sessions. A casual consistent client session the reason I did not add this was a little too technical. Operation have a casual relationship with reflected ordering. Client application must ensure that only one thread at a time execute these operations at a client session. So this line probably, hopefully, I could be wrong, means that thing, client applications must ensure that only one thread at a time executes these operations in a client session, which could mean one of 2 things, which I'm not sure now what it means. Okay, when you're creating this session, your client application may only one thread can run this session at a time, which might be because why you see this error. Okay, by 2 people try to create a session at the same time. How did I reach this session thingy? I reached it from. Do I not have that link? Basically, this is what I did yesterday. How to create transactions in MongoDB. Because this is the syntax to do this is very simple in PostgreSQL or like general SQL. I want you to understand how do you do this in MongoDB, and I probably reached a blog post like this, which pretty much took me to the solution. So yeah, what is a session? I don't know if I'm being honest. I looked at this code base and copied it over. It's much easier to understand in SQL because over there when you're writing SQL, you create a transaction and then do all your SQL queries and then commit the transaction. In Mongo, this is the way to do it. Happy to dive deeper into this if you want, but that's a high level. Is this similar to a deadlock? No. There will never be a deadlock here. So no, deadlocks usually happen when one thing depends on the other, and the other thing depends on the first thing. Are we using JWTs? We are using JWTs. Sir, बहुत difficult हो रहा है. The guidance needed. Thank you for teaching. Okay, so yeah, that is why I'm hoping very heavily that this thing is very well structured. I could be wrong, and in which case let me know, because it was very hard to create 18 slides and put everything along with the solutions here. If this is not useful, then I'm happy to do it more ad hoc. Then I'm happy to do more simple applications as well. So let me know, because this almost took like 6 hours yesterday. After yesterday's class was not as structured, me and a few other people sat down to write this. So if this is not useful, if it does not have 10x benefits of having structure like this, then let's do something else and try something else. Okay, it is useful. I was hoping it was not useful because it's like sort of hard to do. Okay. God damn it. Chalo theek hai. Let me look at a few questions. Can you explain the session thing once? Yeah. If you really want me to explain it, let me. Do you need it? No. When we create the real Paytm application, we'll create it in Postgres. Even if you do raw SQL queries in Postgres, creating a transaction is very easy. Even if you don't do a raw query in Postgres and you use it, Prisma, which is what we'll be using, it's much easier, but both of these are very simple. Mongo is a little twisted when it comes to these slide links, but I'm happy to. If you really want me to cover sessions in MongoDB, happy to. But let me tell you, no one uses MongoDB. Let's see, where was I? Where are the slides? I mean, dude, slide links I'll post on Discord. I've posted it a few times now. Come on, guys. Slide link. It's basically go to this website and then there's one project here. I'm basically trying to add. I'm hoping, not trying. See, I'm hoping. Don't take. Oh shit! I got rate limited myself. I'm hoping to add all the slides here with structure like this. If this is useful, I'm not committing this, but it's very hard to do. I can tell you because it took 6 hours yesterday. So we will see. We just need some terms and docs. Makes a lot of sense. The only thing new in the session is seltzer and filter. Transactions and filters, and one thing which we weren't able to reach to was creating a front end like this in Tailwind. This was a recap class. This wasn't. Yeah, we weren't supposed to learn something new today. How do I get access to all the slides until now? That you'll find on app.analyticsdev.com. How to remember things? You can Google syntax. Don't worry about that. Explain session, not just session. What's session? What session are you talking about? Are you talking about? Maybe you're talking about a different session. We've not used any other sessions today. What should opt for utilizing an index versus refraining from employing index in a database system? What should you opt for utilizing an index versus refraining from employing an index in a database system? Seems like a very complex question. Are you trying to ask, should you use an index or not? Is that your question or something else? Akhilesh? Let me go back to YouTube as well. Can you post more projects like these? I will try. Mongo versus Postgres difference. Sir, Google it. There are 1,000 YouTube videos out there. It's very simple. It's not simple, but like basically 2 different paradigms to do data. There are various types of databases: SQL, NoSQL, graph databases, vector databases. All solve sort of a different purpose and expect a different sort of a syntax. That's the high level difference. What are the technical definitions? We've covered this in the MongoDB video. Should go there. So the transaction will only allow one request to the database at a time. Won't this? No. No, it will not. Oh, good question. It will not lock the database yet. We have not done that. You can do that as well. You can start locking rows and locking a database. We have not done that. We have said we are assuming / hoping the same person does not send money to the same other person literally together. So what is being logged here, or what will cause a conflict here, is if anything. If you look at the code here. What will cause a conflict here is if during this transaction some other transaction happened that tried to write to something that was being read here. The conflict will only come if a transaction for these 2 users happens at the same time. If I send to Raman and then person 3 sends to person 4, they can happen concurrently. There won't be a conflict. Conflict only happens when I'm trying to write to something or when I'm trying to read from something that has been overridden in the same transaction during that specific time period during which this transaction happened. Then there will be a problem. So it will only be a problem if the same person is sending money in a very small time span. The storing decimal places thing is a good question. So even if you use Razorpay APIs, or this is true in blockchains as well. I don't know if you've heard, if you've done Ethereum a bit, but even in Ethereum, you never store decimals on chain. Never. Whenever you're dealing with transactions, I don't know if you've heard of this thing called Wei or Gwei and then ETH. When you send someone 0.1 ETH, you're not sending them in a database. 0.1 does not go down. This number goes down or up. You always divide. You never store decimals in a database if you're doing payments. Why? Because there is something called precision errors, which happen both in databases. Unsure, I'm pretty sure they happen in databases as well, but could be wrong. Definitely happen in languages like Node.js or JavaScript or even other languages. कि भाई even if let's say 8.88 was stored here, a lot of times when I get this in a variable, what might be stored in a variable might be 8.7999999 in this. You never want this in a payments app, right? You never want even a 0.00001 to get lost from someone's account. So you have to worry about precision errors a lot when you're dealing with money. For that reason, you say, bro, we are not supporting decimals at all. We only support integers, both here and here. Whenever you ask me for my balance, I will tell you two things. You have 8,000 units and we have 2 decimal places. So you basically have 80 rupees. Or I will tell you, you have 80,000 units and we support 3 decimal places. So you have still 80 rupees. What is stored in the database is always this number, which is why if you ever hit Razorpay or Stripe APIs also, you will see they return you not 8,000, but some very big numbers with a lot of zeros, because that's what's stored in the database. And they have a global setting of, we support 3 decimal places. So whenever we're returning you this, assume it is actually just 80 rupees, because we don't want to store 80.000 in our database. We want to store some very big number. And this also means, they don't support anything beyond 3 decimal places. You can never store in Razorpay or some other payment API. I'm sending someone, or I want to charge someone 8.0001111. There is a certain decimal points until which they support it, which for Ethereum, for example, is 18. In Ethereum, you can send someone 0. Max 17 zeros and 1. Itna ETH. You cannot send smaller ETH than that. That's the smallest unit. And whatever is that smallest unit, you store, that number into this in the database, which will always be an integer. That's a high level. Plan for next 2 to 3 weeks is backend basically. Yeah, so going back to backend after this. What DB do companies use? Postgres is the most popular one. When will Prisma be covered? That's probably what will be covered in the upcoming weeks. TypeScript, Prisma, Postgres, OpenAPI spec is what's coming in the next 2 to 3 weeks. I want to create a project on WebRTC. Let me do something similar for a WebRTC project. A simple, the YouTube stream that I did on Google Meet. Let me try to create and break it down into similar, smaller, chunks. And then let's see if that's useful. Class on security measures. Sure. That's probably 1-200. You haven't written to front end on this one. I feel connecting to backend, but the front end is very difficult. I tried, but got stuck. I will create an offline video, of course, for the front end on this one. It will come out this week. So you can look at it. If a single thread and there are 100 users which request at the same time, it takes 2 seconds for the first user. So 19 users will not be able to send the request confused. No. So that's the problem. The blocking isn't. Oh, if this thing. No. Okay. So this is even more simpler question. Whenever this await happens, the request for the second person can come in. That means you have not cleared your fundamentals from beginning. This await doesn't make the thread sleep. The thread is not waiting here. Thread moves on to handle the second request, which also is stuck in this asynchronous call, and then moves on to the third request, so on and so forth. Whenever you are awaiting, does not mean your thread has stopped executing. It is just now handling other requests. So if you send 100 requests, first request will get stuck here. Chalo, I'm waiting for the database. Let me move on to the second request. Then that will also get stuck here, so on and so forth. Once you process all 100 of them until this point, then whenever the first one tells you, haan, bhai, this is what you got back, you proceed from here. Then you get stuck here. Then you move on to the second one, so on and so forth. You have to understand, go back to the initial classes. We discussed this many times. Why aren't we doing client-side filtration for searching users? If this application has 10,000 users, how will you do client-side filtering? You'll send all 10,000 users to the front end. You want to only send 10 at a time, right? There's also another concept that I haven't introduced here, which is like limits and offsets and cursors. You probably don't want to. Our query is sort of unoptimal right now. If we have 10,000 users, you will send a list of 10,000 users to the front end when they ask for all the users. You want to send them 10 or 20, and you want to add pagination, which is something I just skipped for this one to keep things simple. Where is this ACID properties in transactions in DBMS? ACID is different. Transactions are different. What we've done today is transactions. Session in the Mongo is like WebSockets of Express and Mongo. Good analogy. I'm unsure if they use WebSockets. Most probably they don't use WebSockets. They probably send a single request to start a session, and then the database knows there's a session open. Could be wrong. So I don't know if they use WebSockets under the hood, but yes, the analogy is right. It's a more persistent connection until the session drops. What happens when two people send money at the same time to other people? That's fine. They'll execute concurrently. You won't see this. I mean, you can try all of this out, but if I did this for the same set of users, then there was a problem. If there are different user IDs here, it will execute almost 100% sure. If we did not cover Axios until now, release a video on it. I mean, we did cover it, but the high level is, dude, it's just an API. I mean, okay, how difficult is this? How to move from fetch to Axios? I mean, this is literally very simple. I don't say this for everything, but am I wrong on this? Let me do a poll. And there are a lot of beginners here as well. Should I teach Axios in an offline video? Maybe I'm dumb here and maybe it is something too difficult, but should I teach Axios in an offline video? No, right? Oh, it's 50-50? Fucking A. Well, okay then. We will cover Axios in an offline video. But it will pretty much be like a video version of this thing. Sounds good. Okay, I need to be a little more. Sounds good. Custom hooks. There is a video I added from last cohort that has it. I will also cover it in an offline video. I have written it in the next set of videos we have to do. YouTube. How are we doing? What happens when I try to transfer money from one bank account to someone? Some of the transaction fails. Why do bank tell you to refund in 24 hours? Yeah, that is a whole different ball game. Google Pay in the end connects to 100 different banks piche. So that if Google Pay does not know from HDFC Bank what has happened or not, they can't tell you the transaction has succeeded or not. So that is, yes, a good question, which if I have to be honest, what case causes that trigger? What triggers Google Pay to be like, now your transaction is stuck for 24 hours, we'll refund in some time? I think the answer there is some manual effort to call the bank कि भाई हुई कि नहीं transaction there, which is why that happens. How can I reach you personally? Okay, slides are useful, I get it. We'll keep them. How can I reach you personally? There's no easy way to reach me personally, sir. But 100xjobs@gmail.com is something important. How to send real-time money using bank server? You mean real money using bank server? You have to put at least 25 CR into a bank account, create a private limited company, go to a bank and ask them for APIs. Very hard to do. What is temporal? Do you know? Temporal in itself? No, I don't know. Is the class finished? Oh yeah, feel free to drop off. Just answering questions now. Please do a video connecting this node application with Postgres and do some CRUD operations, please. We will cover Postgres in detail soon. We will probably, we'll cover it. I'm sure if we'll do raw Postgres queries or if we'll do it via Prisma, but I do have a video from last cohort in which I introduced Postgres, which does do raw Postgres queries if that's what you're looking for. Do bank really store money in our databases? Where else do you think they store money, sir? If not in a database, where? What do you think happens when I go to netbanking.hdfc.com? An API call happens that hits a database. Why does it feel scammy? It just feels scary. If the database goes down, what happens? And yes, it does. What happens if you take down all, all data centers add together? What if all wires are cut? You're pretty much lost with your balances, right? What if every data center of HDFC Bank burns down at the same time? You're screwed. So yeah, but of course there are resiliency practices in place. A small example here is every video that I'm uploading on the cloud right now, I'm also backing up on my home, and I will also eventually back up in my Chandigarh home. So you add resiliency like that. So if this house burns down, that's what it does not matter though. It's my owner's house, not mine. I'm staying here on rent. But if it does burn down, I have another copy here. If everything burns down at the same time, you're screwed. Why no Zod parsing in / transactions? You can add it. I mean, I probably just have missed it. What was / transactions? Oh, okay. Yeah, you should add Zod validation there. Where's YouTube? Will this be a front end back end design offline? I will make the front end for this connected to the back end and post it offline. Yes. Offline video on ShadCN. I think I wrote this down yesterday. Happy to. Can't dive directly into ShadCN. First need to do Radix. Usse pehle need to do why you need Radix and then need to do ShadCN. Happy to do it. Not top priority. Tell me when to Google and when not to Google. Just Google the right. Okay, not what not to do. Go to ChatGPT and copy this, paste this in ChatGPT, get the answer and paste it. That is something you shouldn't do. Basically, try to do things how they were done before AI was a thing. So I've always Googled, and maybe I'm just being archaic here. Maybe going to ChatGPT is fine. I have no idea. I have never used it when I was in my learning phase, which is why I don't know. But I've always used Stack Overflow in my learning phase. Still do. That's been my path. That's why I've always left, Stack Overflow links here, but not ChatGPT links. So that's a high level. It's okay to Google basically. The only thing to keep in mind is when you're writing code, type it yourself. You'll create muscle memory like that, which is super useful because you don't want to keep copy pasting code always. You can always do it now. Thanks to AI, you can always use GitHub Copilot, whatever. But at least create some muscle memory and then stop doing it. Yeah. 1-200 starts 1st of March. Why can't we inspect bank website in Chrome or other? You can inspect any website. If I go here, right click, inspect, I can inspect whatever I want. Yeah, you can inspect bank websites. Front end page, there's nothing fishy there anyway, so you can't do much with it. You can't do anything with it basically, but you can always inspect. When is 1-200 starts 1st of March. Please view Zoom chat. Okay. What is a CDN? I have a video transcoder video from the last cohort. I'll put it there. Covers it in deep depth. So let me write this down though. That's a good video generally to have. That covers like what are CDNs, how are they different from normal servers, why do you need, what use cases you need CDNs for, what do you need normal servers for, so on and so forth. It's a good video. I posted it on YouTube as well, but had to take it down because of some reasons. Real world scenarios will help. Where? In like applications like these. Delhi meetup is not anytime soon. I'm going tomorrow or day after to some place. I have to do a poll to understand what kind of a meetup it will be. Will it be a closer meetup with 300-400 people and we do it again and again like during a week, or will it be a stadium wala meetup? That's something we need to decide and then go from there. So in a while basically. What did I have to write? CDN video post on cohort. All right, thank you Yunus, I appreciate it. I will try to create more projects. Do you touch typing practice? No. All right, I think the questions are going off topic here, so let's call it. It's also 9:07. How does betting websites work? I'm thinking of making a video on it on YouTube, so happy to cover it there. When do you cover routing, auth, Redux, and a few other topics? We have covered routing, we have covered auth. We've not covered next auth, which is something part of the cohort syllabus. We'll cover that after next, but we've covered routing. We've not covered Redux. We're covering recoil. We have covered recoil basically. All right, guys, let's call it here. What if we want to Dockerize it? Can we start multiple instances in different threads? Yeah, you can start multiple instances in different threads. Database will still, do the right set of lockings. So, what should be the next goal after the assignment? A few things you can do is like move it to Next.js, the front end. Another thing you can do is Dockerize it. Another thing you can do is auto deploy it on Render plus Vercel. Add a CI/CD pipeline. There are 1,000 different things you can do. Move it to Postgres. Those are a few things that come to mind. All right, let's call it. Someone said something. I have to read that. Thank you, sir, for answering question. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, the good thing in classes like these is like advanced people can move on and do the whole thing, and then basic people I can answer questions. So glad that was it. I think let's increase the offline video frequency and let's do more or ad hoc sessions like these. That way, yeah, basically everyone's happy. I think that's a better way to learn. Slow offline videos has been my learning until now. And then fast or, sessions like these where you practice is, I guess, a good way to learn. I don't know. We'll see. But okay, guys, let's call it here. I need to pack. I will see you guys next week and in a few offline videos. How to find a user if they have pagination in my application? I mean, you send the filter request, you paginate, the person presses the next button, you send I'll happy to cover it. We'll cover pagination at some point. So let's call it, guys. I will post the video very soon. This was great, and let's do more of these. Going to quit now.